All right, what is up, people? I am here once again to show you guys how to craft boots this time for the beginner, the intermediate, and the expert level. So for the beginner level, it's just going to be some recomming again, but with a little bit of sauce on top of it. So for the beginner level, we're going to be crafting 35% MS boots with some pretty good rolls on them. And we're going to be doing this quite cheaply. I would say a div, maybe 2 div at max. So the first step is we're going to need to, of course, recom. I know it gets shit on a little bit in POE2 for being like trash compared to POE1. And after having played POE1, I can admit like POE1, the recom is fucking broken. Don't let that distract you from the fact though, that in POE2, the recombinator is actually still a broken mechanic for what it does. And that is helps you set up really cheap crafts fairly reliably. Here's kind of like the breakdown. I was buying these 35% MS bases for around 20 exalts each. And then I was buying these tier 1 percentage ES boot bases for around 10 exalts each. So the total cost is around 30 exalts. I would say that at 30 exalts, it actually becomes worth it to be using these recombination omens. All right, so one thing is if you're kind of a beginner, you might not know this, but you almost never want to buy things for like the listed price, right? The listed price here says 40x, but the actual price that other people are paying is like 26.5. So I'm sure I could buy some of these for like 27 exalts. Like that probably won't be that hard to do. You end up just saving a lot of money on this. And it ends up making a lot of things that aren't worth it, then worth it again. So at 40 exalts, it's probably not worth it, but at 27 exalts, it probably is worth it to use the Omen of Recombination here. For boots, there's no cheap way to do it, like Falconer's jackets in my previous video. If you're gonna recom, the bases are gonna be a little expensive, but not actually expensive by any means. Like this whole craft, again, will only cost you like a div probably. Essentially what we're gonna do is the same thing. We're gonna recom these 1-to-1 percentage ES with movement speed. It's a 22% chance to succeed. If we are using the Omen, it's going to be around 40% chance to hit. It's 30x for the bases, 27x for the Omen of Recombination. So it's actually very, very cheap. What is that? 57 exalts per base. Right now, exalts are like almost 1 div to 400. So this should cost you well under a div to complete the entire craft. Let's just do it. We should have a few of these bases and we should be good to go. Animation cancel this again. We missed. Never lucky. Cool. We got 1. Got 2. Do. 3. It's a 40% chance to hit, and we won 3 out of 6, pretty much on rate. On average, recomming one of these 35% MS bases with the tier 1 energy shield base, 2 attempts of that with the recom activated will generally yield you 1 of these end results. These bases cost 30x together, plus 27 exalts for the Omen of Recombination, so 57x. Together, that's around 114 exalts. It's very, very cheap right now, considering that divs are nearing the 400 exalt mark. For boots specifically, there's this weird interaction where flat energy shield, percentage energy shield, these both have defense tags. However, hybrid defensive energy shield with sun threshold has no defensive tag. As a result, when we homogenizing exalt and we just have the defensive tag with the speed tag, we can guarantee one or the other of these 2 energy shield rolls, which is perfect because these are the 2 energy shield rolls that we want. Now, the reason why I have you specifically go for percentage energy shield is because if you start with flat energy shield and you homogenizing exalt, let's just say greater exalt, right, with a 35 eye level, guarantee tier 4 or above. If you start with percentage energy shield and you homogenizing exalt for flat energy shield, you guarantee tier 2 or above. So if you do this, you just essentially double your odds of hitting tier 2 or above. It's just a lot more efficient to do it like this. But anyways, homogenizing exalt and then pray for tier 1 energy shield. And if we hit tier 2, it's not the worst thing ever as well. Homogenizing sinistral exaltation with a greater exaltation orb. We have a 50-50, a 1 and 2 of hitting tier 1 energy shield, tier 1 movement speed, and then tier 1 flat energy shield. If we hit that, it would put us off to an insanely good start for our boots. Boom, we hit tier 1 energy shield. That's awesome. We're going to do it on a second pair here. Tier 1 again. And then this one was tier 2. Womp, womp. And most of the time, you're not going to want to like div these up. So that's why I recommend in my filter, which I'll link in the description again, I usually go for like 95% energy shield or above because the 92 roll and the 100% roll, they have the same odds in the recombinator. The higher the energy shield that you can get for the recom bases, the better. For example, like this, we luck or dog a high roll of flat ES. Now we have like a mid to high energy percentage roll as well. So these boots are fucking insane. These boots are also not bad, but unfortunately the roll for this is quite low. And then these boots, they're okay, right? They're okay. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to desecrate. I highly recommend though that you use a echo. These are quite cheap. And for what we're going to do, it'll be very, very useful. So they're only 80x, another fourth or a fifth of a divine. So from here, we are going to want to rib each of these. You can make the argument, since this one is tier 2 ES, maybe we don't echo this one, but these two triple tier 1s, you're definitely going to want to rib for this next part. What are we looking for our desecration here? If you're doing hybrid ES EV boots, maybe you want to desecrate on deflection or something like that, but we don't care about any of this. All we really care about is like rarity, maybe int, but most importantly, we want resistances. If you're familiar with crafting, this will probably be very intuitive for you, but if you're kind of newer to crafting, I'm just gonna break it down for you really quickly. The idea of blocking. Theoretically, if we just want triple resistances on our boots, which is definitely something that we do want, although we are happy with like rarity, tier 2 or above, maybe like tier 1 int specifically. If we are to desecrate on resistance, it's really good, because the next step, we're going to homogenizing exalt for more resistances. So we definitely want one of these resistance tags on our boots. But if we are to say hit elemental lightning resistance, then it's a lot less likely to hit another elemental resistance, right? Because we have 5k weighting for each of these resistances. If we hit one of them, it then becomes 10k to hit the next one. And if we hit 2, it then becomes 5k. However, if we are to desecrate on one of these hybrid resistances, they don't block any of these resistance rolls. So if we were to desecrate this on, we then still have a 15k weighting to hit on an additional elemental res for our homogenizing exalt. Whereas if we are to desecrate on one of these elemental resistances, we would only then have like a 10k weighting. And these hybrid rolls are equivalent to like, I think tier 3 of a combination of chaos and lightning resistance rolls. But one thing to consider is that chaos isn't a really high value resistance right now. I would value this at more of like a tier 4 resistance. If you do hit like tier 3 of these elementals or above, I would prioritize them. Tier 4 resistance, and then you hit this as an option, I would pick this over the tier 4 just because it again frees up more likelihood to hit an elemental resist on our next step, which is the homogenizing exalt. If that was a little bit confusing, don't worry. I think it'll make sense in the next step. Even if it doesn't really make sense, just know that if you have the option between this, and this is tier 4, I would take this. If it's tier 3, I would take the elemental resistance. So let's see what we get here. This is fucking amazing. We hit tier 1 cold. You just take that every single time. The second echo, fuck that shit. We got exactly what we wanted out of these boots. Awesome. Now we go again. Okay. So here we got, a little unlucky. This is tier 2 rarity, I believe, which is definitely good. We really want resistance for the desecration. It then allows us to homogenizing exalt for the next step, which is very, very important. If this was our final roll, of course, we would accept rarity here. But since we have one more roll, I think it's better just to fish for another resistance. Oh, awesome. This is incredibly good. This is tier 2 or maybe tier 3. Tier 3, tier 3 is perfectly acceptable. Of course, the downside is we block one of our resistances rolls now, but tier 3 resistance is way better than having no resistance, right? And then let's just send it here as well. No echo because it's only tier 2 flat. And we hit absolute dog shit. Awesome. This one's not very good. The way we craft this one is it's probably going to be YOLO, a moment of greater exaltation with a greater exalt itself. You're going to win some, you lose some. Would be an example of you losing some. But even losing this, these are still really good boots, right? We're not too upset about this, but at the same time, it's not ideal. So we're going to slam here. And theoretically, if we hit like double tier 1 resistances, these boots are actually good again, but probably we won't. So let's make sure we toggle this shit off and YOLO. All right, tier 2 cold res. That is not bad at all. How much are these boots worth? So these are like 330 ES boots with resistance on them. Yeah, you look here. These boots are worth not 3 div. That's too high. That's too high. Probably like 1 or 2 div, honestly. Hopefully we can do better on these boots though. So we have a desecrated resistance on now. What was the point of that process? Well, number one, having resistance on our boots is really good, but more importantly, adding on a resistance gives us additional tags. So what tags do we actually have on our boots now? We have defenses from the prefixes, but we now also have fire, cold, lightning, chaos from the elemental and resistance tags. On top of that, we also add these shitter mods because they have the elemental tag that we don't really want. But if you look, we add 16k worth of weighting of resistances that we really do want, and then we only add 6k worth of weighting in terms of tags that we don't want. Overall, this is really, really good, right? Because we're adding way more chances to roll resistances than we are to roll bad things. And if we kind of remove these tags and we just look at what it would look like if we were to slam a normal greater exalt here, you would look, the odds of hitting any of the resistances are like 12%, whereas with the actual tags on, they are closer to 20%, 21%, which is almost double likelihood of hitting resistances. And that is why desecrating on one resistance is so important, because in this next step, we are going to homogenizing exalt on for more resistances. There is an argument to be made here with tier 1 cold res for us to use a perfect Exalt Orb, but this is the beginner level. We got really lucky to get here, and I'm assuming that you guys don't really have the funds to invest 3 div into boots. If we just use the Greater Exalt, the price of the entire craft still stays within around a div. So I'm just going to do that anyways to kind of simulate what you guys should expect. But I would heavily recommend that if you have boots that look like this, quad tier 1s, it does make sense to slam a perfect Exalt here. But anyways, let's just pretend that we don't have the funds to do that and we can just slam anyways. We'll start with these boots. Homogenizing Exalt, Omen of Greater Exaltation, we should receive at least 1 resistance like 80% of the time. We got Chaos Res plus Reduced Shock Duration. It's not great, but not the worst thing ever. I know you might be thinking Chaos Res is useless on these boots, but that's not necessarily true. Not many builds are going Chaos Inoculation this league, and a lot of builds, in fact, aren't going Chaos Inoculation, still want just pure ES boots. So this Chaos roll isn't the worst thing ever. However, one thing to consider is that people don't actually search for it that often, so it definitely does have less value than elemental resistance. And then moving on to these boots, let's just slam and Prage. Oh my god, we actually hit pretty nicely here. We had tier 2 light and tier 5 fire resistance. These are pretty much best case scenario for our boots. Let's take a look at the pricing for all of these. Let's take these ones, add on the Chaos Res. I mean, 7 div is kind of a stretch. I would say we could probably sell these boots for like 5 div. I think 5 div wouldn't be unreasonable by any means, but not bad at all considering how little it costs us, right? And then here we go again on these boots. These are absolutely fucking giga. We have 100% total elemental resistance, 35% MS, tier 1 for all of our energy shield rolls. This should be a pretty solid boot. Yeah, and 12 div is looking like the number here. Ours have way better energy shield, but I would say ours is definitely comparable, if not slightly better than this. 13 div is a lot of money to you, and every div really counts. You could try and put yours up for 13 div, but at the same time, I think in general, it's always just good to undercut the market by like a little tiny bit just to guarantee your thing sells, because theoretically the boot market could get flooded with a bunch of boots, especially in the upcoming days. A bird in hand is worth 2 in the bush. I think this was a really successful craft. The process for these are really quite simple. We are going to be recomming for specifically percentage energy shield with 35% movement speed. Afterwards, we're going to homogenizing Greater Exalt the maximum energy shield on. This is a 50-50 to get tier 1. We won the 50-50 2 out of 3 times. We got semi-lucky. If we hit tier 1 here, we're definitely going to desecrate with an echo. If not, it's up to you. You can desecrate without the echo or with the echo. I'm really not sure, expected value perspective, which one is correct. And we're going to fish specifically for resistance. For the next step, homogenizing Greater Exaltation plus Greater Exalt for the next 2 resistances. Anyways, this whole process was a total of around 380 Exalts. And if we look here at div prices, believe it or not, we are fast approaching the point where that is actually only worth 1 div of investment. So not bad at all, considering that the worst boot that we crafted was worth a div, roughly, as we just price checked before. The mid boot that we crafted is worth around 4 or 5 divs, and then the really good lucker boots that we crafted are worth around 10 to 12 divs. This is an incredibly profitable method. I did this a lot at the start of the league, and it looks like people haven't really picked up on it. It's still really profitable, but this is kind of the method that you need to go through, the process for crafting just really top of the line 35% MS boots. This last league would have been worth like 60 div, but there's been quite a bit of power creep this league, so these are only worth 12 div. But as you can see, it only costs you maybe like a div to craft something like this. Understandable that it's a little bit cheaper now, but that start to finish is how you craft really, really solid beginner or entry level boots. We'll put these away for now, and then we'll get on to the more mid-tier craft for boots. So the mid-tier craft for boots is going to be quite different. We're not going to recom, and we're actually going to need quite an expensive base. We're going to be doing Sekima sandals, and we are going to need them to be exceptional quality, which means that they have 2 rune sockets without being corrupted, not sanctified, and not fractured. I'm a fucking penny pincher cheapskate. So we buy this base for 14 annulments. That in divine is around 6.5 div. So just by paying in annulments, we actually get half a div discount. So what we're going to want to do here is quite straightforward, but this is going to be a little bit expensive. In my first video with the Falconer's jacket, it was like the beginner craft was only 100 exalt, and then the intermediate craft was only like a div. But unfortunately with boots, you can craft them so deterministically. The beginner method, while it only costs like a div, can produce you like some of the most powerful boots in the game. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the gaps between the costs for this are going to be a little bit more drastic. So the first craft, the beginner craft, was only going to cost 1 div. The intermediate craft for these boots are probably going to cost us somewhere from like 20 to 30 div. Kind of an expensive process, but I'm going to show you how to do it the most efficient way possible in a way that will most likely be a lot cheaper than what you would be paying if you were to buy them on trade. But with the introduction of a couple things, primarily the exceptional bases that have 2 sockets on them and the Essence of Horror, 100% increased effect of the socketed items, along with these runes, which give you 5% movement speed, now makes it so that each socket on boots now gives 10% movement speed. These 2 sockets equate to an extra 20% movement speed. So the fact that this is only eye level 80 doesn't actually matter at all, because even with 30% movement speed on the boots, with the 2 sockets and the horror mod, we will be getting 50% movement speed boots. You might be thinking like 5% movement speed, is it really worth that much? Honestly, yes, because if you think about it, last league, once 35% movement speed boots were accessible, almost no one paid for 30% movement speed boots anymore, right? Because mobility is such an issue in Path of Exile 2, 5% movement speed is so important that people are willing to pay like dozens and dozens of divs for. Anyways, that's like kind of the spiel on why we're doing this base and what our goal for these boots are going to be. So how do we start here? A lot of the materials for this base kind of went up pretty significantly, specifically annulments. So the strategy I'm most familiar with in order to get our first stat, which is going to be percentage energy shield, is using trans augs to fish for tier 1 percentage energy shield. What perfect augs do is they have an eye level minimum of 70. You cannot exclude modifiers with tiered currencies. So the max roll of every single modifier will still be accessible, which essentially just means that we now have a 1 in 6 chance of rolling percentage energy shield every time we perfect aug a prefix. Now, including the fact that you're going to be hitting suffixes like half the time, as well as like, you know, half the time you're going to annul off the prefix and roll. So I would say it's going to cost you around like 9 or 10 annuls on average in order to hit percentage ES. With current prices, that roughly equates to like around 4.5 div in order to hit percentage ES, which is perfectly acceptable. The alternative is you're chaos spamming for tier 1 percentage ES. If you do that, the odds of hitting are going to be around 1 in 115, which is also close to around 4 div. This takes a lot longer. And also by doing the perfect aug method, you have a significant chance of hitting a good suffix as well with your perfect aug. Okay, so we have percentage ES on the prefix and we have a shitter mod on the suffix. That is okay. What we're gonna wanna do now is we're gonna wanna use a essence, cold, fire, doesn't really matter, around the same value, but this will kind of guarantee us a tier 3 resistance on these boots, which are very, very nice. Go tier 3 here. So from the spot, there's pretty much like a branching tree here. There's 2 different things you can do. I don't want to get into it too much, but I hope this doesn't make it too confusing. But essentially here, if you have 3 good affixes, you're always going to have tier 1 energy shield. You're always going to have tier 3 of a resistance. But if this second affix that we ogged on the previous step is good affix as well, like tier 2 fire, tier 1 int, tier 1 rarity, even tier 2 rarity as well, maybe not tier 2 int, but something like that, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to suffix jawbone and then fracture here for a 1 in 3. You ideally want to fracture a suffix. That just guarantees that you have 1 good suffix on your boots. If not, then it doesn't make a difference. You're just going to have, you know, this energy shield fractured on, not a big deal at all. And we're going to continue with the craft. However, we don't have that situation, so we're going to do something different. We are going to get the next crafting material that we actually need, an essence of hysteria. These hysterias can actually guarantee 30% movement speed on boots. So we don't have to roll for a second mod or anything like that. So this, in conjunction with a dextral crystallization, will essentially make it so 50% chance that life regen gets removed off, and then we add on 30% MS from the Hysteria Essence mod, and there's a 50% chance that we knock off the cold resistance. If we knock off the life regen, yeah, we're very, very happy about this. If we knock off the cold resistance, it sucks, but not a big deal at all. So let's just do that. Dextral crystallization makes it so that it targets the suffix only, and here we go. Awesome. So we converted our life regen into movement speed. This is amazing. This is best case scenario here. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do the dextral suffix thing that I just talked about, because we have 3 good mods. Add the suffix modifier here, and then we're just going to add on a normal rib. Cool. Normal rib added on. That is very nice. And now what we're going to do is we're going to try and hit a fracture here. So we YOLO the fracture. Hopefully we hit the cold res. If we don't, not a big deal. These are so cheap. These are only like 1/4 of a div each. If we win the 1 in 3, we guarantee a good suffix on. If we don't win the 1 in 3, then nothing really changes. We hit the movement speed, not a big deal at all. But if we hit the cold res, as you'll see in the future, we'll be able to guarantee 1 decent mod onto our boots, which actually goes a long way. So just like in the previous example, if we just have percentage ES and even movement speed as our prefixes, our tags look kind of like this. We can only roll these 3 mods. We already have this mod on and we already have this mod on, which means that we can only roll max ES. However, with a perfect exalt, with an eye level minimum of 50, we are guaranteed to hit tier 1 flat ES. If we have tier 1 flat ES on and we go for percentage ES, we are guaranteed to only hit tier 3 or above. That's why it's so important to start with percentage ES, because with percentage ES, we can guarantee tier 1 max ES with a perfect homogenizing exalt. So with this homogenizing sinistral exaltation here, with a perfect exalt, we are guaranteed to now have tier 1 percentage ES, 30% movement speed, and tier 1 flat ES. Beautiful. The rolls are nice as well. The next thing is we are going to need to activate this Omen of Dextral Crystallization one more time, and we're going to have the Essence of Horror. So before, remember I said we were fishing for a 1 and 3 on the fracture for the suffix, and that is because we really want to keep this cold res on. If we don't keep the cold res on, we are going to need to fish for another resistance, kind of like in the previous boot example, and there's a chance that we miss there. And a lot of the times we are going to miss. So having the fracture is really nice because we're going to have to eat a 50-50 here. And if we remove the cold res, that's really sad. We lose a good resistance roll. If we remove this Unga Bunga text from the unveil, it's really good because we can just re-add it on, except this time with like an ancient rib or something. But that's why we don't add the ancient rib on before, is because we are trying to knock this off. And if we knock off the ancient rib, that's kind of like minus 1.5 div for no reason. Rage, we don't hit the cold res. We got pretty lucky here. We protected the cold res, and then we added on this increased effect of socketed items. This has an eye level of like 0 or something like that. So if you whittle, this always get whittled off. The only thing we could do is 1 and 3 dextral and null, and that's just really not price efficient. So winning the 50-50 here is incredibly nice. It kind of removes a lot of the RNG element from this craft, because all we have to do now is use an ancient rib, and ancient ribs, although are expensive, pretty much guaranteed to have a pretty decent modifier now. So let's throw this on. And let's make sure that we have our Ecto activated, and we're going to unveil this. Nothing good here. Rage reroll again. And awesome. Like, this is tier 3 lightning resistance. This is more than good enough for us. So we actually have a pair of incredibly solid boots now. Like, this isn't best case scenario, but it's very, very close to best case scenario. If we plug in the ES, these are 430 with the runes in. If we take a look at the rolls here, ours are actually better than all of these. This is tier 2. This is a worse base. I would say 40, 45 div is definitely reasonable, but at the very, very minimum, something like 35, 37 div is also acceptable. But if we were to say like hit a shitter roll on this, which I think is definitely going to be possible, the end result would be closer to like 23 div. So the fact that we high rolled the lightning res here is pretty meaningful. But on average, these boots are going to be worth like around 25 div, I would say, if you have like one good mod and one shitter mod with the 100% increased socket effect. So there is a little bit of a gamba there. That's just something that you kind of have to keep in mind. I would say it's not really worth the Omen of Light reroll these. It's 5 div for the Omen of Light plus the rib. If you do it once, it's going to cut a lot of your margins. And if you do it twice, it's going to start being like negative EV. From start to finish, that's the whole craft for the intermediate boots. These are really, really nice. They definitely sell. I've sold many of them. And you can even gamba for the third socket. If you hit the third socket, it's worth quite a bit. But that's completely up to you to do. So the first step is the boot base. That's going to be around 6.5 div. The second step is going to be a null perfect AUG for tier 1 percentage ES. That's going to cost you around 5 div. Afterwards, we're going to AUG again. If we hit a good stat, amazing. If not, we're going to have to do some shenanigans with the dextral crystallizations with the horrors and hysteria. But the price is going to be around the same. Horror and hysteria, which is 4.5 div. And after that, all we're going to do is throw on an ancient rib and fish for another good suffix. Brings us to a total cost of around 17.5 div for the craft. As you saw, if we were to low roll, it would be around like 20 to 23 div. So still going to be a profit no matter what. And if we get pretty lucky and we get 2 good mods plus the horror mod on the suffixes, that means we are going to have around a 30, maybe 35 div item on our hands. Definitely profitable still, and definitely going to be a lot cheaper to craft yourself if you were planning on self-crafting for your own use, which is what I was doing in my Zero to Mirror challenge. Now moving on to the expert level boot craft, what do we do? Unfortunately, I can't give you guys a live demonstration of how to craft these boots because over the last few days, I don't know what's happened. I think maybe a couple really rich players have earned the market on them and bought up all the bases and everything, selling them for like 5x what they used to be worth. So for example, when I was doing these boot crafts, I think 4 days ago or 3 days ago, I was able to buy 2 or 3 of these bases for 150 div each. I think even one of them I was able to buy 100 div. So it just feels like I don't want to get scammed and, get price fixed on for these boots. Fortunately, I have clips of when I crafted these boots before, and I'll just kind of talk you through what I was doing in those examples. But I would really not recommend you pay 700 div for these boots, maybe like 300-400 div at most. But yeah, let's get right into the expert level boots. So these are eye level 82 second movement boots, which means we can actually roll tier 1 movement speed, which is 35% MS, and we can also roll tier 1 of the elemental resistances. You might think that like 5% difference in boots and like tier 1 versus tier 2 LE res might not matter, but for incredibly rich players who are min-maxing, this is the difference between selling boots that are worth like 80 div and boots that are worth like hundreds and hundreds of div. It's not really about how much value they give you, it's more just about how rare they are and how perfect they are. Because these boots we're going to craft into literally perfect boots. So the way we're going to actually craft from these boots is similar to what we did with the previous boot base, but a little bit different. We are going to need to, instead of perfect AUG annulling for tier 1 percentage ES, we are going to perfect AUG annul for tier 1 movement speed. Not only do we want tier 1 movement speed, but we are probably going to want to perfect AUG annul until we have tier 1 movement speed plus tier 1 of either item rarity or any resistance. I mean, I got pretty lucky. I hit it literally on my first try, but it's not that unlikely to do. It's probably like a 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 to have tier 1, which is only going to cost you like 5, maybe 10 div. In the grand scheme of things, that feels like a lot of money, but considering the base itself, I paid 150 div for, now is potentially worth hundreds and hundreds of div. 5 or 10 div doesn't really matter. What we do from this point, we just add on a third affix and we whittle that affix until we hit another tier 1 suffix that we want. From here, we just have to keep on whittling for another tier 1 suffix. We essentially need to get to the point where 35% movement speed, as well as 3 tier 1 suffixes of any combination of tier 1 resistance or tier 1 rarity. Be like 30, 40 div to get here using whittles with greater chaos orbs. So we're in a position now where we have tier 1 movement speed with 3 tier 1 suffixes. All we need to do now is Ancient Rib and Omen of Light cycle until we hit tier 1 percentage ES specifically. Annul off this shitter ass energy shield mod with this Omen of Light. Put this shit back on.
CL0CK_9 just subscribed.
Yes! Literally perfect rolled ES. This is exactly what we want to see here. The odds of actually hitting this are quite high. I think it's like 20 or 25% chance per Ancient Rib. With the Echo, it goes up to like 40%. It'll cost you around like 20 div on average in order to hit this mod. And once you hit tier 1 percentage ES specifically, just like the previous bootcraft examples, you can then guarantee tier 1 flat ES. So now with this homogenizing exalt and the perfect exalt, we are now guaranteed to get tier 1 ES because iLevel 50 only has this one roll. Oh my god, and we almost hit max roll on that as well. And once you do that, you're pretty much done. You have 6 tier 1 boots, triple tier 1 prefix, triple tier 1 suffixes. All you have to do from this point is add an Essence of Horror. The Horror will guarantee remove one of the suffixes, but since we have 3 tier 1 suffixes, it doesn't matter. And then we will end up with a boot like this that has triple tier 1 prefixes, double tier 1 suffixes, as well as the 100% socket effect from the Horror mod. And voila, you're done. Absolute perfect craft on these boots. You can div it up however you like. I mean, you could definitely just sell it as is and someone will buy it, but I'm a fucking idiot / degenerate, so I decided to vol them. I'll let you guys see the results. I said you were smart on my stream today. This is not smart. This is not smart. Then tell me how we just got 3 motherfucking sockets on our boots. And blah. Why? Yep, we got fucked. Minus, at the time, 300 div. Right now, probably closer to like 700 div. It was a little bit painful. We crafted 2 of these boots actually, and we missed on both of them. We didn't just miss, we actually bricked them on both attempts. It was kind of rough, but from start to finish, that's the whole high-end expert level bootcraft. It's quite expensive to do, but it is really, really deterministic and easy to actually complete the step, despite how expensive it is. Anyways, this was all 3 levels of crafting boots. I hope you guys learned a lot from this, and I hope you guys have some luck crafting these boots for yourself or for profit crafts, whatever you plan on doing. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I hope to see you guys again in the next one.